everyone. Today I'm going to rant a little bit about secondary stats for Preservation Evoker, but before I'm going into 11.1. Mainly, why the haste situation is fucking terrible all around, and when it gets better on one side, it gets worse on the other. I am going to explain a bit in depth how the stats look like for the Undermine patch, and what you have to look out for what you're in, but that's coming after I spend the next 10 minutes ranting, so if you're just interested in that part and don't want to hear me complain for a bit, I'm gonna drop a too long didn't watch about it right now. So here it goes. The secondaries you want a year for in 11.1 are whatever QA Live tells you when you run your sim. Seriously, just please sim your shit and follow that. I know it's not the answer people want to hear, and they prefer a neat list with all the stats put in order, but the reality is a little bit more complicated than that, and at the moment, honestly, you're just not smart enough to figure out what piece of gear is better just by comparing what secondaries they have. It's just not gonna happen. You're way better off simming in QA Live and saving everyone the pain of trying to decipher your loot by hand. You really can't go wrong with simming, and if your guild is asking you to tell them what items do you want from the raid, and you need to know what secondaries are better for that, you can either sim an upgrade finder, or tell them to stop handling loot in the most dumb way possible. Your choice out of those two. So, with that out of the way, here's why Haste has fucking sucked for most of the existence of Preservation. If you usually check video guides from content creators and some high-ish level meticulous players, you have probably heard before that Preservation needs 15 or 20% haste or some other random number around that ballpark. In reality, most of them are just talking random shit and are unable to actually justify the number to recommend, besides it's what feels good to me, which, if you ask me, is not really good enough. Haste hasn't been a good stat for Preservation until now, because a big part of your healing just doesn't scale up with haste. You do get a shorter cooldown in Burden Embrace and Temporal Anomaly with more haste, but your Spirit Bloom and Dreambreak cast are always the same. On top of that, while Dreambreak healing is increased by haste because it is a heal over time, Spirit Bloom isn't increased at all. Spirit Bloom does have a heal over time component now, but that part isn't haste, so having more haste doesn't affect the spell at all. If you're playing an Echo build in Raid, where your gameplay is ramping Echoes before a spell and then live binding a Spirit Bloom, then haste is doing almost nothing for you there to actually make you heal more. You get better and Embrace back quicker, but you don't really care about that cooldown because you need the Spirit Bloom to send into the lifeline anyway. In short, there's a bunch of little things like that where haste just doesn't increase certain passive healing, while other stats do increase the whole thing. If you combine this with the fact that Mastery is used over Tune, and Crit has extra interactions with Reversion and now with Dreambread in Chrono Warden builds, then haste just falls behind. It's obviously not actively detrimental to have haste, like you're not gonna cry because someone pressed a Bloodlust because you don't like haste. It's just not great when you could have different stats instead that increase your healing for more. It does get better in Mythic Plus when Reversion is a bigger part of your healing and you're actually using the Temporal Anomaly and Burden Embrace cooldowns as they come up, even though it's still behind Mastery in how much healing you're actually getting from it. So, the real reason people preach for haste and recommend to get a bunch of it right off the bat is just because having haste feels fucking good. Being faster is just great. You feel like you can respond to things better and move around, and it more directly affects how you think your character is doing, even if in actual numbers it's not doing much. If you have been playing Preservation for a while like me, another good example of this was our Dragonfly Season 1 tier set. The instant cast Living Flame from our 4-piece didn't do jack shit, because Living Flame was an incredibly crappy spell, but the fact that they were instant when the spell normally takes a bit to cast made them feel really good. It was absolute crap, but feels beat reality for a lot of people in situations like that. A small disclaimer here to be clear, Living Flame and Lifespark have been buffed a crap ton since then, and now it is actually good because your Living Flames are actually really powerful, and get increased by a decent amount by Lifespark instead of almost nothing like they were back then. So, to recap, haste has been crap for a while because it just doesn't increase your healing as much as other stats do. It is not illegal to have haste, and secondary stats are still much less important than actually playing the game correctly, but still, if you were picking between stats in two pieces of gear that were otherwise identical, you got more value out of more Mastery or Crit. Not anymore though. Haste got better, but in a very, very messy way. So, the new toy for 11.1 is that Flame Shaper got a bunch of haste scaling baked in. Haste now directly reduces the cooldown of Engulf, and it already increased the healing of Dreambread, which in turn increased the healing of Consume Flame. So now haste not only gets you slightly stronger consumes, but also you can get more of them. On top of that, Engulf now reduces the cooldown of Dreambread, so if you get more Engulf, you also get more Dreambreads. So now, instead of being a really meh stat, Haste now gives you more uses of your biggest button, which in turn causes a whole bunch of other stuff to be better. And so, Haste is now not shit like it used to be. It's still behind Mastery in how much healing you get per point, so don't log in to recraft all your things to Haste just yet. But it's better than what it was. The problem now is that there is another very important thing to consider that is messing with Engulf, and that's Stasis. As you are probably aware, Flameshaper lives and dies by casting 4 Engulfs back to back using Stasis and healing a crap ton in that window. You still want to do that, so you still always need to have 2 charges of Engulf ready when a Stasis comes up. During 11.0, everything lined up perfectly because Engulf cooldown is 30 seconds and Stasis is 90, so you could use 1 Engulf and then save the next 2 for Stasis. Now that Engulf CDs is reduced by Haste, however, it gets messy. There is a certain amount of haste that means you can cast 2 Engulfs on their own and still have 2 more charges ready for Stasis. So there is a breakpoint. Which, if you ask me, is fucking terrible, because it means the value of the stat changes drastically depending on how close you are to a very specific number, and that sucks to play around. Now, I'm not happy to say the number, but the breakpoint is 20% haste. If you have 20% haste, the cooldown of Engulf goes down to the point where you can cast 2 of them and still have 2 more charges for the following Stasis, assuming you're using it as soon as it's up. If you're delaying the Stasis for any reason, then you can get away with less haste. So we end up here. In theory, the best thing you can have is as much mastery as possible, exactly 20% haste, and everything else in crit. In practice, you're gonna go over that haste because reaching an exact percentage when loot is RNG is not realistic, and you might want to keep other gear around because if a boss makes you delay your stasis, then you can still get that extra charge with less haste, and in that case you might want a little bit more in mastery or crit instead of the haste. If you ask me, this is a mess and I don't like it, but we're gonna have to live with it. Haste is not terrible even if you go past the 20% breakpoint because it's still increased a decent amount of other things, so you can just not think too hard about it. And honestly, the easiest answer is just always gonna be to sim your shit. QE Live will take into account any breakpoints and pick between the things you actually have available, so your best solution is to just let the thing do the math and just focus on playing the game better. Improving your gameplay will have way better results than watching a 20-minute secondary stats rat video telling you to get 20% haste. As for chrono watering rate, haste is still terrible. And in Mythic Plus, where you are definitely not gonna play Flameshaper, haste is decent because you don't play in the same way you do in raids and there's most things going on. Mastery is still better though, and Simen and QE Live on the dungeon setting will get you most of the way there. But if you're wondering about crafts, you can just craft your things with Mastery Haste and have a great time in your kits and in Flameshaper raids. So, to end things real quickly. Haste is much better in the upcoming patch compared to what it has been historically in raids, but it's dragging in new problems with it that we'll have to deal with in time. The best answer is always gonna be to sim your gear in QE Live, because it is running all the very complex math that you're not doing to figure out what is actually better. And for crafted items, as long as it has mastery and not versatility, you're most likely doing it right, so don't worry too much about it. That's gonna be all for now. As always, guides for 11.1 are gonna be up in Spirit Bloom Pro right as the season starts, and the guides for the content itself are gonna come up soon after as we start doing the content. If you have any questions or comments, please write it down here or message me in either the Evoker Discord or the Spirit Bloom Pro Discord. I'm always happy to help and discuss things with people. Hope you have a great start of the season, and bye bye.